Hey guys, it's Miss S. We are going to talk about the Victorian era a little bit today. We're going to do another one of those history contexts. But I wanted to show you your Google Classroom first because we're going to do a vocab words today. So make sure that you go into our poetry hip hop unit materials and you either open up your vocabulary packet if you attached it here like you should have, which it only looks like one of you guys have. If you can't find it here, you need to go into, I'm sorry, I'm into my mouth, your Google Drive. And you're going to have to search poetry vocab packet. And it should show up and you should be able to find it. But I would open that up so you have it along with you so that when we get to the definition part within the slides, you can copy down the definition because we will be checking the vocab packets relatively soon. So what are we talking about today? We have captions. Okay, so we're talking about the Victorian era today. Victorian era actually happens right after the Romantic era. So we did our Elizabethan first, and then we jumped over like 150, almost like 200 years into the Romantic era. This one doesn't have a time jump. This is straight from the Romantic era to the Victorian era. So our Romantic era, we looked at nature, we looked at imagination, self-reflection, a lot of emotions and what it means to be a human. And now this is what's happening right afterwards. So just like the Elizabethan era was named after Queen Elizabeth, the Victorian era in England was named right after Queen Victoria, who you see here on the left-hand side. And it is from 1833 to 1903. So, little different this time, and that's specifically because of some of the things that are going on with the Victorian era. Dickens, as in Charles Dickens, who wrote like Great Expectations, the Ghost of Christmas Past, all of that. I don't know why I'm blanking. A Christmas Carol. I don't know why that took me like a second. I had to like look it up because it was really bothering me. Wrote Christmas Carol, Great Expectations, Oliver Twist. He was like very influential during the Victorian era and was like almost one of the most well-known authors of the time. So the Victorian era was like the rise of the novel. So the novel in specifically was like super big, and so Dickens was pretty much in charge of a lot of the novels. So a famous quote that he said about the Victorian era, which really describes it very well, is that it's the best of times, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. So everything that was going really great in England and for England, there was also some sort of side effect that was like making it terrible at the same time. So I mentioned for Romanticism how we were going to start getting into the industrial age. This is like industrialization to the max. So we are officially like all about industrialization. I just realized that I'm blocking your captions. Okay, so everything was becoming a city. I mean, when we'd said it before with Romanticism, how cities were starting to spring up, this is like times 40. There are cities just popping up everywhere. And so the industrialization isn't just about the cities, it's also about creation of all those factories and the rise of the middle class because of those creation of factories. So we have a lot of like new class systems, a new way of living, a lot of newness going on in the Victorian era. Where that comes into the worst, the industrialization, because we're doing so well and we're making money and profits and we're just like taking all this tech and science in. We ended up going to a bunch of other countries and we pretty much created our like colonies, right? But we kind of took over like a dictatorship kind of thing. And so at one point it was something like almost 2/3, I'm pretty sure, I have to double check my fractions, but I would say almost 2/3 of the entire world was like owned by England at one point during this. Queen Victoria had like over 1 billion citizens that she was queen of because of imperialism. Obviously because of industrialization, like I said, the factories, the cities were also growing, so we have growth of cities. That's something that was great. We had these like hubs, major hub areas where trading was happening and people were talking, and so literature was being exchanged. We had the invention of like an easier press, so again, the literature was exchanged a lot more quickly, as well as to different class citizens, where before it was maybe just like a higher class. Because we have that middle class who can also kind of afford some of this, they were starting to get some of this literature too, and they actually could read it because they were becoming educated. But with these growth of cities, we see a huge rise in pollution and disease. So people are getting sick all the time. There's pollution all over the streets, right? Like, so they didn't have sewer systems. They're using their pots to go to the bathroom, and then they're dumping it out the window, right onto the sidewalk. So with these cities, they were expanding so fast they couldn't keep up with the hygiene of them, and so diseases were pretty rampant during this time. Technology and science. Our Romantic era, right? We talked about how it's like human nature over science. The Elizabethan era was kind of like human nature over religion. This is like science. Like we're like, look at tech, look at science. This is super cool. Look at all the things that we're able to do. Look how much we're expanding. Look at all the benefits from all of this, right? So they actually really appreciated their tech and science, and that actually played into like some sci-fi genres that were created during this time. But because of that, they also had a lot of anxiety and were incredibly nervous as people because all of these long held beliefs that they've always had about religion or what it means to be a human that they've spent centuries building were now kind of being threatened by that tech and by that science. We were starting to wonder, like, oh, well, like if Earth wasn't the center or if religion isn't real. And so these things that like really gave them faith, hope, and support were just starting to disappear. We also have a lot of political reform, which is one of the best. So this kind of can't be explained until I explain the worst for once. Child labor, growth of cities, and these extreme industrializations with all of these factories. Child labor was great. We have the growth of the middle class. We need our children to work more so that we can afford, so we can afford our flat in the city. So all my children need to work, and I need to have a lot of children to help me work and be able to afford that flat and the things that I need. And in fact, again, the factories, we know the children have small hands. They were able to create some of the textiles that maybe an adult couldn't because they had too big of hands. So they were working a lot. And that was one of those worst things. We know that the conditions in the factories were terrible, especially for children. No breaks. They were losing fingers or even limbs. The disease was also spreading rampant at the same time. So they were sickly. And so with that came that political reform. This is actually the start of like the unions, really was like the Victorian era, where people started banding together and saying like, no, we need this in order for us to work. We need a safe environment. We need this amount of pay. Like, so things like unions started forming, but it also just like in general political reform, specifically around the working class. This is a big focus on the working class. So poets. Famous poets are going to be people like Robert Browning, who you're going to learn about in just a minute, and who is the author, the poet for the poem that we're going to cover in our poetry packet for this era. You've got Albert Lord Tennyson, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Dickens, Bronte, Charlotte, and Emily, right? You're getting a lot of mixtures of men and female. We see more females starting to pop in and at least be appreciated and known for their works. Commonalities. Again, commonalities is our major themes. What major ideas do we see? And so nostalgia, that goes back into that long-held beliefs being threatened, where people were nostalgic for the way that the world used to be, how things were simpler and how they did have that return to nature, and now that's all gone because of these cities. The talk again about social class a lot. Like I said, we have the growth of the middle class, and then we also have like that political reform going on. So there's a lot of talk about social classes and the I'm going to use a word called dichotomy, the dichotomy between the two, meaning the difference, the huge, like how polar opposite the upper class was from the actual like lower class poor. We have things like the woman question, again, that pops into the fact that now when I'm saying famous poets, there's some women there. The woman question was kind of like, what's a woman's place? And we see this thing called like the new woman coming out, which was kind of like, what does it mean to be a woman? Can they be someone other than the housekeeper and the mother, right? So this woman question was like, what's a woman's purpose? And specifically, the new woman was about like these women who were fighting all these old standards for women and what we were supposed to be doing and what we were capable of doing, and just saying like, watch me destroy everything you thought I could do. Progress and exploration. Exploration pulls into that imperialism, right? We're going into other countries. We're almost like kind of like dictating them and taking over and calling them our colonies. And then progress, of course, is because of that technology and science and the growth of cities and the industrialization, the political reform, all that is considered progress. So those are your major themes that you see throughout. And this is our vocab word. So if you do have your packet open, you can maybe like split your screen and have this video playing while you pull open your vocab. I will talk about the actual definition, which is down here, but I'll also go into like more detail specifically about each part of the definition. But Robert Browning, he created a new type of literature, and specifically in poetry, and it's called the dramatic monologue. The dramatic monologue we see all the time in plays. It's something that you're going to come across, and you probably have already come across a lot. But we're going to talk about it specifically within a poem, and specifically within what's called My Last Duchess. But we need to know what it is, right? So your definition is right down here that you're going to copy into your vocab packet. That says, Dramatic monologue, an imagined speaker addresses a silent listener and reveals something about themselves in the process. So what does that mean, really? So these are the requirements in order to be a dramatic monologue, which is pretty much just the definition broken down. We need a solitary speaker who is typically not the author, meaning this speaker needs to be the only one talking. No one else is talking. They are solo and they're speaking. And they're not the author. That's why we use the term speaker, and we've defined that already in our vocab packet, that a speaker and an author can have completely different ideas and beliefs. So this is the speaker, not necessarily the author, and they are the only one speaking. And while they're speaking, they're going to unintentionally, meaning not on purpose. They don't mean to be doing this, but they do it anyway. They're unintentionally revealing their character or who they are as a person. So maybe I'm like, I am the most honest person in the world, right? And then I go on this like solo speech, and within my speech, I'm actually showing you like how I'm a crazy liar and just like really believable. And I don't mean to be telling you that, right? I've never my purpose to be like, hey, I'm a liar. I want you to think I'm honest. But within my speech, you can start going, wait, I think that's a lie. Wait, that's a lie. Wait, I think that's a lie. It's like me going up to you guys and being like, yeah, I've been teaching for 30 years. I've taught at the best schools ever. I've got 7 kids. I'm 45. You would be like, that's not, none of that's true. So while I'm not trying to tell you that I'm a liar, I'm showing you, I'm revealing that I'm a liar. And then the other part is just that the reader is the silent listener who takes part in the drama. So the reader in these cases for dramatic monologues are very active readers. Remember we talked earlier in the year about what an active reader is? In this case, that activeness is you deciphering or finding out what it is that that speaker is revealing to you. So you're listening and paying attention to try and find out what's the shady thing kind of going on. What's this guy trying to hide? And so when we read our poem, My Last Duchess, our speaker is going to be the only person talking throughout the poem, even though there's someone else there. And they're going to reveal things about themselves that they don't mean to. And so your job as the reader is to listen in, and as we analyze, try and figure out, what's he hiding? What's something that's going on that maybe he's trying to like not say out loud, but he's kind of revealing about himself. So that is our Victorian era and our vocab word for the dramatic monologue. This is our video, so make sure you've copied down our definition for the vocab, which is, again, dramatic monologue. And then you'll see this Google slide is also attached at the same spot this is on Google Classroom, and you have a Pear Deck link you need to follow. So the Pear Deck's just going to ask you a couple questions about this lecture. Make sure to fill that out. That's your classwork for today. It is graded. So again, as always, let me know if you have any questions. All right, guys. See ya once I figure out how to exit this. Okay.